me congratulate all of you for taking up a course on a very important issue, public finance and government accounting. The subject, despite being so important and so critical, didn't receive the kind of attention, priority that it deserves, particularly from the professional community. As a result of which, both these issues remain only for academic discussion. We hear about public finances maybe once in a while, government accounting probably very rarely. But without realizing the importance of it, we'll not understand why we need to focus on it. Firstly, let us look at government accounting. The expenditure once incurred is the money spent. If it is spent without ascertaining whether we got really everything that we were expecting from that expenditure, because the money spent on any item, government expenditure, is raised from taxpayers' money. In a country which is already a developing country and therefore always stressed for resources, if you are not going to get the desired results from the investment or the expenditure, how can you make a progress? And how would you know whether the money which is spent or invested has got a desired results unless you have proper accounting system? Can it be just be accounting as it traditionally known as, because you are all professionals? Accounting, in my opinion, has something before the accounting happens and something after accounting happens. What is that something happens before accounting? It has to have a strong budgeting. If you don't budget and you incur expenditure, it can always result into not getting something which was expected out of it. And that, of course, presupposes that the budgeting is done very carefully, as we call it zero-based budgeting, and exercises which go into very detailed analysis about the need for incurring expenditure, etc. So budgeting is a beginning of the accounting process, in my opinion. And then comes post-accounting is outcomes. These outcomes can come from management information system. If you don't integrate all these ends, from budgeting, accounting to the end result of that expenditure, you'll never be able to capture the true meaning and the true purpose of that expenditure and the true benefit that accrue from that expenditure. And therefore, making sure that we work on this, we must put a system in place. This is what I attempted. Even as a railway minister, I tried to put that system in place and I actually implemented it. It's not something which I'm talking about academically, though I did that for a long time to impress upon people that we must work on government accounting as a very important priority subject. But I actually implemented railways. So there should be a very big focus on that. Other part is public finance. It's a very vast subject. Normally our attention is on corporate finance. There are a large number of people who work on wealth management of individuals as well as corporates. But we rarely pay enough attention on the larger issue of public finance. In a way, to simplify it, I always believe in that, of course, is that money originates only in one place. That's the individual's incomes. All the individual's income are the root cause of finance. Of course, when you say individual, there are also natural individuals, natural entities like corporates. Their incomes together is the source of any finance. What corporates save or what corporates create the wealth, that is one source. The individuals, when they earn money, save or keep it as well, that's another source. When they spend the money, both corporates and individuals, it's gone. But when they save the money, that becomes a pool for investment. Now, where the public finance then figures into all this? The governments have the sovereign right to collect taxes. That is taking part of that income from corporates, individuals and other entities as their own right to collect taxes, both direct and indirect. Indirect taxes we don't realize going from income, because when we expend money, it goes from, it is embedded into that expenditure. But when government collect taxes, that becomes part of public finance. Governments can expend those taxes, collected taxes, into something which becomes expenditure, and that's where the accounting comes in. Now, that particular share of government public finance is a revenue receipt for the government, because tax collection will happen every year. That revenue receipt must be very carefully spent in a way that you do not create revenue deficit. Because once you collect 100 as taxes and spend 150, then where are you going to get that balance 50? So you have to borrow for the balance 50. That's another source of public finance anyway. The government borrowing is a major source of public finance nowadays. But that balance 50 that government is borrowing to spend more than what they collected is creating huge challenge for future generations. Because how will you service those borrowings? The borrowings, past borrowings will be serviced from present incomes. Obviously, there's no other way. Either current incomes, or you'll have to borrow more to service those taxes or service the past liabilities. So just imagine, when I'm collecting 100 and spending 150, the balance 50 will result into additional taxes in future to service this 50, or additional borrowings in future to pay for the past liabilities. Now, even if I take additional borrowing, where am I going to pay those borrowings from? Again, two ways. That I have borrowed 50 to pay for the previous 50 rupee loan, but now if my current situation goes in which I am currently always going to have a revenue deficit, it would mean that my future borrowings will have to be constant to pay for the past liabilities. It's a very dangerous game. And that would put to jeopardy the ability of the governments to make government balance sheets look like a good, presentable ones. It is a different matter that government don't prepare balance sheets. But public finance, therefore, is so important because there is other implications on this. When government start borrowing more, because it has no other choice but to do that, where the money comes from? From the market, you can say. Where the money comes from the market. Either from, again, corporate savings or from the individual savings. The moment you preempt those possible sources and convert them into government borrowings, the private sector and others will not be able to borrow that much. And because there is so much of demand on money that you are borrowing more than what is normally should have been the case, the interest rates will go up, which in turn will cost the economy dearly. So it's a very important part of the entire economy is to focus on public finance adequately, which in my opinion is not happening as much as it should be. And particularly you young friends, are not always so young, but of course not as old as me, focusing on this is a very heartening thing. Public finance, government accounting. I was doing one PhD in public finance from Mumbai University. Government accounting I actually implemented in various responsibilities that I held in the government. And when I was presenting the budget to the parliament as a railway minister, I had a right to look into the government accounting issues on my own without referring it to the other ministries like Ministry of Finance. And therefore I could act on it. So I actually worked on these issues from both sides, looking at it as an academician, but also putting it into practical purpose. And I worked with the Institute, the research foundation of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, to prepare a very comprehensive, under my chairmanship, and Mr. Other members were also involved, and we prepared a first ever comprehensive document on how the outcome budgeting should look like. And I presented it to then finance minister. So I feel this is the most important issue. Cannot be ignored anymore and cannot be treated like an academic only. It's a genuine real life problem. Today, it has assumed a new importance. Globally, all the countries are now over leveraged. Most of the countries, at least the OECD countries, the most developed countries, have borrowed more than 100% of the GDP. So public debt to GDP ratio in most of the developed countries has exceeded 100%. Though there may not be any prudential norms for borrowing like the corporates have, when you cannot borrow beyond a particular level, what is not mandated by your memorandum of association or by articles of association or by company law. And many times you have to take shareholders' permission. Or in case of banks or in case of NBFCs, the regulator decide how much you can borrow. In case of governments, in India, we have the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act to regulate it. But even then, in a very unique situation like what we're facing today, the governments will always be tempted to breach that limit and borrow more. Luckily, our government has not borrowed more than what was necessary. It's a very sensible thing. And most of the governments in the world are over leveraged. And therefore, public finance